Welcome to Amplify with Darrin L. Harris. Today we have a great show for you. Today we're talking about something that is a pressing issue in America today. We are talking today on Amplify with Darrin L. Harris about over policing in the African American community. So stand by. We're going to have some great conversation. We're going to tell some stories. And I'm going to actually talk about my own personal experience with law enforcement. And then at the end of this podcast, yes, I'm going to tell you how to deal with the police. So get ready. So you got to stay tuned for the whole show. I'm going to tell you how to deal with them when you have a situation, whether, they stop you on the street, whether they knock on your door or whether they pull you over. I'm going to tell you exactly how to deal with law enforcement when they stop you. For those who may think that you're going to have an issue with law enforcement, you need to hear this. In fact, that's all of us. We look at the conditions today in America and we see over policing happening all over America. We see the Trump administration sending the military to major cities, predominantly African American cities, mind you, with African American leadership, mind you. And so it's going to be really important that, we know our rights, and we are going to talk about what this has done. We're going to even talk about the history today of over policing in the African American community. But before we get into today's show, here's what I want you to do, because we are on YouTube. And so that means I need you to subscribe to this channel, to the Darrin L. Harris channel, so that you won't miss any episode from Amplify with Darrin L. Harris, because we're going to be putting out a lot of information, some great information that's going to be needed. Just like today, I'm going to tell you how to deal with the police. Don't you want to know how to deal with the popo? Well, I'm going to tell you how to deal with the popo when they stop you, when they pull you over, or when they're knocking at your door. That's what I'm going to do today. Once again, my name is Darrin L. Harris, and we're going to have a great show. And let's get started. And let's have this conversation about the over policing in African American communities. Now, here's what I think, that before we even begin, I think it's important to kind of lay the groundwork, because when we talk about over policing in the African American community, I believe that it's important that we go back and we look at the history of policing in America. Because, see, that will set the stage, that will help us to understand what policing is today. Now, if you go back a few hundred years, when slavery was running rampant, when our ancestors, I'm talking about African American people, were brought here forcefully, illegally, beaten, raped, abused to build this nation, many of them, many of them died enslaved. And they were here to build this nation. So, just like any human being, wrong is always going to be recognized. And our ancestors, many of them realized that they were being wronged. They realized that they were brought to an unknown place to build a nation that they had no vested interest in. And many of them, you see, this is important to understand about history too, because some people think that, oh, African Americans, they were enslaved and they were happy and they wanted to be in that condition. No, many of them, when they realized that, when they recognized that, they fought back. So that part of the story needs to be told. And this is part of the reason why no one wants to talk about critical race theory. That's why they're trying to erase our history, because they don't want you to know the truth. Not every enslaved person was not just going along to get along. Okay. Many enslaved people try to escape their abusers, their oppressors, many of them. And when they attempted to do that, the white elitists, I want you to hear that, those who owned the plantations where the enslaved people lived, they came up with a system so that they can identify and punish and lynch and whip those who were enslaved who would not go along with the program. I want you to hear that. So those who resisted, those who rebelled, they came up with a system to keep the enslaved in check. I want you to hear that. And so they came up with this idea of this position called the overseer. And then from the overseer, you had slave patrols. Now, usually these overseers and slave patrols, because not everybody who was white was rich. So I want to make that clear. During that time frame, not everyone who was rich was white. And that's important to note. So those who were of a lower class, I'm not talking about the slave plantation owners of the enslaved. I'm talking about the poor white folk. So the poor white folk, they were the ones who the rich white folk had said to them, we need your help because you're a lower class. You're not us. What they say, you're not like us. But we need to keep these other people who are less than you. You're not us. You're less than us. Sounds like mega, doesn't it? A mega mess. So we need you to become the oppressor. We need you to become the overseer. We need you to be the slave patrol. So the history of policing really comes from the slave patrol. So when a slave or an enslaved person would get out of character, would fight back, would rebel, would resist, then it was the overseer's job to keep them in check. I want you to hear that. To keep them in their place. And then if they attempted to run, to escape bondage, slavery, abuse, whippings, then it was the slave patrol's job to go get them. Don't miss that. To go get them, to put them in check and put them in their place. And if they still would not do right, then they will be put to death. They were lynched. Don't miss that. This is the history of policing. So when you understand over policing, then this puts it in a different context. So, I mean, I know I'm talking to a lot of bright and intelligent people, but that's why we're having this conversation. And I think it's important to see the history of what over policing has done to African American communities. Because once we understand that, then we can begin to have intelligent conversations on how to fix this. And hear me when I say this, and I want to put a disclaimer out there. I am not against police. I am not anti-police, and I don't think any of us are. I don't think any normal person, because there are some individuals who commit crimes. There are individuals who wreak havoc. And there are some things that need to be controlled. And so I'm not anti-police because I don't want anybody to go and say, oh, Darrin L. Harris is anti-police. I'm not saying that. And neither am I saying that that all cops are bad cops. Neither am I saying all cops are good cops. Back in the day, we had a cop named Officer Friendly. I don't know. They laid Officer Friendly off, or he retired. I don't know what happened to Officer Friendly, but they need to bring Officer Friendly back. Anybody remember Officer Friendly? I mean, but think about it. Things and times have changed, but a lot hasn't. Think about how police are being utilized today. So I'm not saying that every cop is a bad cop. I'm not saying every cop is a good cop. There are good cops, there are bad cops. So, but what I am saying is that we have rights and we need to know our rights. But that's why at the end of this video, that's why I want you to stay, because I'm going to tell you how to deal with them. We're going to get into it, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to deal with the cops. I know a lot of cops watching this right now. I know a lot of law enforcement. You looking at me right now, but yeah, I'm going to talk to people. I'm going to tell people how to deal with you because they need to know how to deal with you. I told y'all this is going to get hot and heavy, and we got a little bit more to talk about. Once again, you're tuned in to Amplify with Darrin L. Harris. And of course, I'm your host. I'm Darrin L. Harris. And I thank you for being on here. Look, if you haven't done it already, here's what I would love for you to do. Why don't you go ahead and share this message? Not only share, but I want you to also like this message, but not just like. I need you to subscribe. So go ahead and hit the subscribe button. And don't forget to hit the subscription bell. There's a little bell there. Hit that because we're going to be uploading a lot of information and we don't want you to miss a thing. I want you to be a part of the Amplify with Darrin L. Harris podcast community, and we're going to be doing some great things. In fact, I'm going to be listing some links, so you can go right down to the bottom of this video, and you'll be able to see some important links. You'll also see a link to our website, which is amplifydlh.com, and you'll have access to a lot more information. So there's a lot. So right now, do me a favor, go ahead and hit the subscribe button because we want you to be a part of this great community and experience. So before I go any further in talking about this and having this conversation about over policing in the African American community, I want to share a story with you. Now picture this. There's a teenage boy and he is about to go to high school and he's in the band. And so it's the summertime and it's hot and they're having band rehearsal practices. And, it was one day and the band practice was over. The young man, he grabs his trumpet case and he heads for the bus stop. He gets on the bus and, it's hot. There's no air conditioning on the bus. And he gets off of the bus. And as he's walking home, he has about 2 blocks to go before he gets to his home. And as he's walking, he notices that a police car begins to slowly drive behind him. And so he kept walking. In fact, he got a little nervous because he didn't understand what was going on. And so he began to walk a little faster. And then he started to run, and the car began to go a little faster. And then all of a sudden, he hears a shout on a loudspeaker, and the cop says, "Stop." And so the young man, he's nervous, he's tired, he's hot, he's scared, and he's shaking. Cops jump out of the car and they ask the young man, "What do you have in your hand?" And he says, "My trumpet." And the cop says, "Give me that." Cop takes the trumpet case, slams it on the car, opens it up, takes the trumpet out, takes the mouthpiece out, searching all around, and he turns the trumpet over, and then he puts the trumpet back in, slams the case, locks it, gives it back to the boy, and he says, "Here." The boy is stunned. The boy is shocked. The boy is scared. The boy runs as fast as he can to get home. And he gets home, he opens the door, slams the door, runs in his room, takes his trumpet case, throws it in the closet, slams the door, jumps across the bed, and begins to bawl his eyes out. Now, this young man decided from that day that he would never play a trumpet again because of his experience with law enforcement, with the cops. He was so frightened, so terrified by that experience that he never wanted to play the trumpet again. I know that young boy because that young boy was me. I know that young man, and it was a pain that I've never felt before. And I was so terrified, and I never told anyone in my family. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't tell my stepfather. I didn't tell my sister. I didn't tell my brother. I told no one. In fact, this is the first time that I'm opening up about this, but it was my encounter with law enforcement. It was that terrible experience, that frightening experience, that experience that breached my trust with Officer Friendly. Because the Officer Friendly that I knew in elementary died that day. The trust that I had for law enforcement died that day. And I'm sharing that story because I know that I'm not the only one who has had that experience. In fact, there are many people who are listening to me right now. And I know that if you're an African American male, according to the statistics, we are 5 times, according to the NAACP and other researchers, we are 5 times more likely to be stopped, searched, and frisked by law enforcement than any other race. And so if you're listening to me right now, and that's why this conversation is important, and I need you to stay to the end because I'm going to tell you exactly how to deal with law enforcement. So I need you to stand by. In fact, I need you to share this message because I have some other startling statistics that I want to read to you from a website. But I need you to subscribe. I need you to like, and I need you to share because many of us, and even if you're not a black man, maybe you're raising black sons, maybe you are a grandfather, a grandmother, an educator, a faith leader. I need you to share this message. I need you to let this message go because we're going to talk about how to deal with law enforcement, whether they stop you, whether they pull you over, or whether they knock at your door. We're going to talk about how to deal with a popo on this show today. Once again, my name is Darrin L. Harris, and you tuned in to Amplify with Darrin L. Harris. And yes, we're talking about a heavy, heavy, heavy topic. and heavy subject, and it's going to get even deeper. And so I just pulled up a few statistics. I pulled my phone up, and there's a website. So this is nothing I'm making up. This is coming straight from a website. I believe that it's a reputable source, but you can do your own homework. But the source is called Police Violence Report, policeviolencereport.org. So check them out. I'll put a link also in the bio so that you can have that information and you can check it out. But they do this mapping of police killings. And here in this particular one, it says mapping police violence, collected data more than 1,200 killings by police in 2024. So I'm just going to scroll through a few of these. It says at least 1,270 people were killed by police in 2024. More people were killed by police in 2024 than any other year in past decades. And I wish I could just let me see. I'm just going to read a few. So in 2020, there was 1,160 killed by police. In 2021, 1,148 killed by police. In 2022, 1,203 killed by police. And in 2023, 1,248 killed by police. And then in 2024, 1,270. Now, if you paid attention to what I was reading, what you would have noticed is that every year it gets higher and higher and higher. And there's a reason for that. These things don't just happen, but they happen for a reason. And so if you're listening to me and you're in New Mexico, New Mexico, in New Mexico, it says New Mexico had the highest rate of killings by police than any other state in 2024 over the past decade. New Mexico. And by the way, out of all of these killings, 96% were by gun violence. The other percentage was tasers and by force and vehicles, but 96%, that's a lot, were simply gun violence. Now, let me put a disclaimer. I got to always put these disclaimers because I'm sure I got a lot of popo listening to me, and I know you're in your feelings and got a lot of things going on. Look, I'm not anti-police, but what it shows is that, when these situations happen, and I'm not saying, I do understand that you have rights too. Okay. So we ain't talking about that, but I'm really pointing this out because we need to get this message out to individuals, especially my community, because that's who I'm concerned with today, is that, there is an uptick in police killings by gun violence. And then less than 10%, I'm not even going to read no more statistics. Y'all can go to that website and get that information. Once again, it's policeviolencereport.org, policeviolencereport.org. But less than 10% of those cases, I'm going to get on another issue just for a minute. 10% of those cases were tried. In other words, I guess they're saying that everybody else was wrong. And this is where I have somewhat of an issue because in many states, many governors and state legislators have created these laws that's given police immunity. Now, hear what I'm saying. If you're in law enforcement, because I have many family, many friends, I'm a Marine Corps veteran. So many of my brothers and sisters are in law enforcement. Okay. And I love y'all. So this ain't for y'all because I know y'all good. Because if you wasn't good, we wouldn't be friends. So I know y'all good. But many of these cases will never be tried. And I do understand that there are times where you need to be protected. I'm talking to law enforcement now. So y'all come on, get out your feelings. Come on here. And I understand that your life is in danger. And, we have seen far too many good officers, good law enforcement lose their lives in order to protect others. So please hear my heart because I have a huge soft spot. I have lost friends who wore the badge because of someone else's incompetence, because of someone else's um, crime, because someone didn't have respect for the badge. And so, hear me when I say this. This is not an attack on law enforcement. And in fact, I'm not saying that policing is bad because we need safe communities. I'm for safe communities. I'm for law abiding citizens. I'm for these things. And a lot of times we see these podcasts and we see other, news articles or we read something and it's easy for us to talk about the things that we're against and what we don't like. But it's also important if we're going to have better communication, if we're going to amplify our voices, right? And we say here on Amplified, silence is not an option. So that's why we're talking about it. That's why we're having this conversation. And that's why I want you to stay to the end of this video, because at the end of this video, I'm going to tell you how to deal with the police. So it's easy to talk about what we're against, but it takes a lot more courage to talk about what you're for. And so that's what Amplify is about. We are here to help people to identify and find their authentic voice so that they can start speaking up for the things that they're for instead of waiting to complain about the things that they're against. That's why we exist. And this is a problem in America. Over policing, police brutality. And when I talk about police brutality, it goes far beyond just an individual who is a bad cop. We're talking about systems. And there are a lot of systems that are criminal and making criminals. There are systems that are criminal because they make criminals. There are laws that legislators have passed, states that I've been in, that create criminals because they need those criminals to feel their super prisons. Can we unpack something really quick? Because we're getting close on time. And remember, I told you I got to tell you how to deal with the popo. I got to tell you how to deal with the police. So please don't go. Please stay. Because I'm gonna tell you how to deal. I'm gonna give you exactly what you need, and your son need to hear it, your daughter need to hear it, all y'all need to hear it, especially for my Hispanic brothers and sisters. Y'all definitely need to hear it because everybody coming for y'all. Okay, I'm gonna give y'all a little treat too. So yo, hola, come on, stop. Okay, y'all stay too. Everybody, I need everybody to hear this. It doesn't matter who you are, whether you're white, whether you're black, Hispanic, Asian, whatever you identify as, purple, doesn't matter. Okay. Everybody needs to hear this because we're all subject to this. So let's unpack something really quick because, there's a state that spent all of their COVID money on building super prisons. And some of you've heard of this whole idea of the school to prison pipeline. So I won't talk too much about that. If not, do some research, research on it. And I'm sure it's going to come up on Amplify again, but the school to prison pipeline. And so they have built these super prisons and I'm trying to figure out what makes them so super. I mean, like when people go there, are they able to get massages? I mean, like, it's a spa? Like what? Like what makes it a super prison? And why do you need a super prison? Right. And then how did you come up with the numbers to figure out what numbers you need to put in the super prison? I mean, you had to do some type, you know, of fiscal analysis. Like you don't just go into business without knowing how to do business. Like this is a business. And so I need my brothers to hear this. I need my African American brothers to hear this, because you have to understand that you're a part of a bigger plot. The slave patrol is real. And so even if you're in law enforcement, you're a part of a bigger plot. It's bigger than what you think. Let me show you. Because many of you have been hearing about gerrymandering. So if you look at where these super prisons are being built, uh, these complexes are being built, and these are private companies. So this is money. And many of these companies, when you do your research, what you'll learn is that they have stockholders. Like, this is capitalism. It's America. And so there are people who have invested in these companies. And so they want a return. And the only way they can get a return is if they lock some folk up to fill these super prisons. And where they have strategically placed these super prisons are usually in rural areas. Go do your research. You'll find it. So why, Darrin L. Harris, would they place these super prison in rural areas? Think about it. In rural areas, the population isn't that large. But if you build a super prison in a rural area, then the population goes up. When the population goes up and they do the US Census, then guess what? Those numbers in that population go up. Now, mind you, many of those who are incarcerated, they won't even vote, but they're counted. This is called prison gerrymandering. Prison gerrymandering. We've been talking about a lot about the gerrymandering going on in Texas. This is worse, because this is just worse. Okay. So if we want to have some conversation, let's elevate this conversation. Let's amplify this conversation around prison gerrymandering, because that's even more dangerous. And so the idea is, if we build these super prisons in these rural areas, we increase the population because we count the prisoners in the population. Then we get another seat. We get another seat in Congress, and we can redraw the maps. Once we redraw the maps, we get more power. We get more power. We pass more laws, and we make the rich richer. We make the wealthier wealthier. We control the population. And so it's bigger than that. So when you think about going out and doing some crime, when you think about going out and doing something wrong, when you know that there is a possibility for you to get arrested, jailed, in prison, think about it, that you are aiding this system. You are giving them exactly what they want. What they want is a legal form of slavery. In order for them to have a legal form of slavery, you got to do a crime. And when you do a crime, they can lock you up. And if you read the Constitution, you'll learn that slavery is not over. Do your research. And that's why I'm going to tell you exactly how to deal with the popo in a minute. But the first thing is, don't mess up. But even if we don't mess up, just like that young man who had the trumpet case that I talked about earlier, for those who may be just joining us, just like I talked about him, and he was minding his business. He was a teenager doing something reputable, coming from a college preparatory blue ribbon school, mind you, honor roll, and still pulled over by the popo. It didn't matter. And this was a young, educated man. It didn't matter that he was doing something good for his life. Let me get off of my high horse. So yeah, it's real. Look, if you haven't done it already, once again, this is Amplify with Darrin L. Harris. I am Darrin L. Harris, and I want you to go ahead and subscribe, like, and share to this podcast. This is called Amplify with Darrin L. Harris. Go ahead and do it right now, because I'm about to tell you how to deal with the police, because we need to know how to deal with it. Because see, now that I've kind of opened your eyes to a few things, and hopefully this is helpful for you. If it's helpful, say it's helpful for you. Leave me a comment, show me some love, but most importantly, please subscribe, share, like, comment. I need you to do that right here on Amplify. So before we go, I want to talk about something. I wrote a book, and it's called Living Life, Leaving Legacy. And in this book, there is a chapter that is near and dear to my heart. It's not a very long chapter, but it's one that where I tell a story that is very personal and deep. In fact, today, as we launch this podcast, this is the anniversary of my younger brother, Lionel Tyrone Harris's death. On October 3rd, 1993, my younger brother had gone to his first high school dance. By the time I woke up the next morning and came from church, I'll never forget the day that the phone rang. I picked it up, and there was my sister. And my sister was crying and yelling profusely. And I said, "What's wrong, Tamara?" And she said, "They say Little is dead." Now, Little is what we called my brother because he was so little. And I heard her, but I didn't. And so I remember hanging up the phone. And then she called right back. And I picked it up. And she said, "Did you hear what I said? They said Little is dead." And she's screaming, she's yelling. And my mother's standing right next to me. And I know she can hear, but I didn't want my mother to hear what I was hearing because I was in shock. So I handed the phone to my mother, and I'll never forget that scream. I'll never forget that wail. So you see, over policing is why my little brother didn't make it. My little brother was shot in his head at 15 years old, leaving his first high school dance. I'll never forget how his head was swollen. I'll never forget how when I asked for answers about why, that I never received it. I'll never forget. And that is a pain that I live with every day. And I don't know what happened. But what I do know is that my little brother, Lionel Tyrone Harris, was shot in his head by a blue bullet. And so that's why I'm passionate about this. And, even as a member of the National Action Network with the Reverend Dr. L. Sharpton, I felt like I knew I needed to do something and I didn't know what, but I had been carrying this burden for a very long time. And a part of the reason why I started Amplify, a part of the reason why we're having this conversation for the first episode is because it's near and dear to my heart. And I owe it to Lionel Tyrone Harris. Number one, to keep his name alive. Number two, to help others see that this is a serious issue in America. And also to help prevent these senseless murders in the hands of law enforcement. And it's not all law enforcement that's bad. I'm not anti-police. Please hear my heart and not your head. I don't want anybody in their feelings. But this is to prevent this. And we all have an obligation. We all have a duty. We all have a part to play. We have a role to play, and now's the time to do it. And I believe that in 1993, that when my younger brother, Lionel Tyrone Harris, was shot in his head, where there was no investigation, I believe that if we had community review boards during that time, and this is my call to action for anyone who's listening, so I want you to do something. If this, and I know that my family's story is not the only story. I know there are many people. In fact, I spoke to a young man just the other day. in a local hardware store, and he was telling me about his latest experience, and they had the wrong person, and how he was dragged, and how they pulled his dreads. And when they realized that they had the wrong person, all they had was an excuse, not even an apology. This has to stop. And so it's going to take accountability, it's going to take training, but we need community review boards. I think it's a very simple ask. It's really important that we do that. So before we end, what I want to do right now, because I told you if you stayed, I was going to tell you how to deal with the police. So now I'm about to tell you how to deal with the police, because we need to know how to deal with the police. But yeah, um, my heart goes out to anyone who has lost a family member because of over policing, police brutality, any of those things. My heart goes out to anyone who has had to deal with that. So we're gonna give some law enforcement a break. So, and I'll tell you, I've done my research, and there's some great organizations out there. So let me go ahead and give props to one organization, and I want you guys to look this organization up, because they have also recognized that over policing can be overreaching. They also realize that African Americans are 5 times, just as the NAACP says, are 5 times more likely to be stopped, pulled over, searched, and frisked by the police than any other race. And so this organization came up with a brochure that you can get online. And I'm just going to read a few of these. This is how you deal with the police. In fact, it's a great brochure. It's by the National Association of Black Law Enforcement Officers. Now, don't go tripping because the law enforcement telling you how to do it, but they're telling you, look, it is an issue, it is a problem. We recognize that it's a problem, and here's what you need to know. So they in this brochure, I'm just going to read a few. It says, and this is how you deal with the police. It says you got to know your rights, but it's not just enough to know your rights. You also need to know your obligations. So it says here, you have the right to know what you're being stopped for. That's number one. You have the right to know how to identify the officer. You have the right to refuse to give consent for a search. You have the right to be treated with respect and dignity. You have the right to ask, are you free to go? You have the right to file a complaint about an officer. You have the right to videotape your encounter. You have the right to stop talking, which I would suggest that you do in the beginning if you can, to stop talking and request the presence of an attorney. Now, in terms of your obligations to speak respectfully. It will always be to your advantage. Do not argue the merits of a ticket unless you are a lawyer. The police will know more than you. Do not badmouth or curse. This will only cause additional trouble. Stay calm. Watch your attitude. Tell the passengers to keep their cool. Do not give them a reason to place you under arrest. Now, that's your rights, that's your obligations. Now, on their brochure, it also talks about what the police have the right to do as well as their obligation. I think that's important for you to know as well. But just for the sake of time, you also on this brochure, you need to know if you have been stopped by the police. You know, it says if the police have stopped you, they think they have probable cause. They think there's a reason, and it's best to remain calm. Properly identify yourself. So that those things are important. And do not run. It says in here, do not run. Do not fight. Do not resist. If you stop while driving, pull over immediately. If it's at night, turn on your interior light. Keep your hands in plain sight. Don't make any sudden or violent movements. Speak calmly, politely, and courteously. And they should do the same. Present your identification when asked. Tell others to stay calm. If you're stopped on the street, do the same thing. So those are some of the things. Now, if they come to your house, I probably should tell you this too. They need to have a warrant. They can knock, they can bang, but if they don't have a warrant, they can't identify themselves, then I would say to you, they can't come in. So these are some of the things that can help save your life. And I wanted to share that and share that information. And so if you want more information, if you want to read or maybe print out the brochure. So if you have family members, those who you love, those individuals in your community, in your church, in your faith institution, at school, wherever, we need to share this information. Once again, it's a great resource. The National Association of Black Law Enforcement, law enforcement officers, they have a great brochure online. So please go check them out. I'll put a link to it in the bio so that you'll have that as well. Once again, my name is Darrin L. Harris, and you've been listening to Amplify with Darrin L. Harris. This has been a great show, but I'm just about out of time. But before I go, I'm going to be putting some very important links in the bio. And so I want you to go down to the bio. But before we go, once again, I need you to do me a big favor. Since you stayed this long, and thank you for staying this long. And I hope that this information and this podcast is going to be most helpful for you and those that you share it with. But here's what I need you to do. I need you to subscribe. So go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, because I want you to be a part of this great community. This has been a great first episode. I hope that you have gotten some information. You've received some information that has been helpful and also hopeful. Once again, go ahead and subscribe, like, share, and comment to this YouTube channel. We got some more things coming at you. And so there are other things that you're going to see in that bio. We want you to subscribe. And in the bio, if you want to link to other podcasts, because we have a whole lot of information, you can get information right here, and you can go right to amplifydlh.com. And there's a lot of information right there for you as well. So we want you to be a part of this great community. Well, I'm excited. This has been a great first episode of Amplify with Darrin L. Harris. I hope that you join me again, because we have some great topics that are coming up. We just getting started, y'all. We just getting warmed up. And so it has been a great series and great time with you today. And so look here, I got to go. I got other things to do. And so do you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. And don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and comment. And you've been listening to, once again, Amplify with Darrin L. Harris. And remember, silence is not an option. If we got to talk about it, we are going to talk about it.